Alright, this is lecture number 3 for Unit 1, and today we're going to talk about Reconstruction. Reconstruction is a time period of 1865 to 1876, and it is following the Civil War. So we're going to talk about the way that the South was reintegrated back into the Union. So in talking Reconstruction of what, we have to understand that the South is ruined. There's no money, no land, no labor. There's physical destruction of the region. Sherman marched to the sea and burned everything in sight. We had 11 Confederate states that had to somehow be restored or let back into the Union, and they needed to be able to become a part of the government again. And we had to be able to trust the South that they were going to do what we needed done. So the state governments had to be constructed, and a freedman's role in society had to be defined. So a freedman is the freed slaves. So remember that these people were enslaved and they had no role in society besides work, and now they had to become a part of society and find their role and adjust to that. So we had to figure a way to allow them to be integrated back into society. So Reconstruction plans to answer how was the South going to be brought back in the Union, what kind of society would the post-war South be, and what is the statute of the freedmen. So how are we going to allow, what are their lives going to be like, and what's their role in society going to be. So the vision of former slaves, they wanted freedom from white control. They wanted to be reunited with their families, remembering that during the Civil War and during slavery, slaves would be sold even if they were with their family because you could get more money if you sold slaves individually. So they wanted to be able to find their families. They wanted an education because education is the key, and they wanted to control their own labor. They didn't want to be anyone to be the boss of them. So they wanted to be able to, do what they wanted to do and make money for it. The vision of the masters / the plantation owners from the past is they needed the ex-slaves to work the land. Some of these people had, thousands of acres of land, and they still had that land still needed to be worked. So they needed to find a way to keep these slaves still on their land. And they also wanted written contracts and black codes, which were strict laws that the freedmen still had to follow, even after they had become free and into society. So who do we think is going to win this? Okay, the freedmen or the white masters. All right, so under Lincoln's plans, so remember, following the war, Lincoln is still president, and to re-enter the Union, he had some difficult things that they needed to do. So the Southern Confederate States must ratify the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the territories. They had to have at least 10% of states' population take an oath to support the Constitution and the Union. That's pretty easy. Only 1 out of 10 people have to do it. That's not a big deal. Pardons would be given to all Confederates who took the oath, so they wouldn't be charged for any war crimes, which is, again, very lenient on these people. And they needed to disband Confederate governments and form new ones. And no former Confederate leaders could be a part of the new government, which is pretty strict. And it shows that these people will not be allowed to try to rebuild the government the way that they wanted it and had it before. We never know what happens because obviously he was assassinated in April of 1865 on Good Friday in Ford's Theater by a man named John Wilkes Booth. So Andrew Johnson takes over after Lincoln, and he again tries to pass some legislation, but it's not strict enough. And there's another group of people called the Radical Republicans. And the Radical Republicans come up with an idea, and this is what they want to do. And this is much more strict. It's much more difficult to achieve. So to re-enter the Union, Southern Confederate states had to ratify the 13th Amendment, which abolishes slavery, ratify the 14th Amendment, which says that African Americans are given full citizenship rights. And the 14th Amendment is really important because it's equality under the law, so everyone is equal, and this is something that is used today all the time in court cases. The 14th Amendment is very strong, very powerful, one of the most important amendments we have because it just makes sure that everyone is treated equally. They must ratify the 15th Amendment, which is the right that you can't deny the right to vote based on race. Okay, and then they also allowed freemen to vote and run for public office. And then they also wanted to divide the South into 5 military districts led by military commanders from the north until these southern states met these above qualifications and conditions. And then they also established a Freedmen's Bureau, which was a government organization that would help newly freed slaves. So imagine that you had been a slave for years and years and years, your whole life, obviously, and you have to become a part of society. You're not educated. You don't know how real society works. You don't know how to handle money, and that's what the Freedmen's Bureau is set to do, is to make things right. As Reconstruction is going, the South gets really upset about it, obviously, because it's changing their way of life, and that's what they're fighting for in the Civil War, is to maintain their way of life. So they have something called sharecropping, and sharecropping is basically slavery. It's just dressed a little bit differently. Slaves would work the land, and they would get paid. They basically rented the land. They had to rent the land that they would work, and then they would sell the goods. So say they rented an acre from a plantation owner, then they could sell, say, the cotton for $10. All the cotton they picked for $10, and then they'd have to pay $10 rent for that land. So they're really not making any money, and it's again like free labor for these people. And then we have and the idea of black codes are still intact. Okay, these rules that they had to follow, they call them a new name. It's called Jim Crow laws. You've probably heard of it. And then we also see the emergence of the KKK. And that's it. All right. So thank you.